Hi, it's Rich Hoffman here. So let's talk about Nick Fuentes and his war against Vivek Ramaswamy. I've heard a lot about it. I've been busy with a lot of things, so I haven't had a chance to catch up on the Tucker Carlson interview or the Piers Morgan interview. I don't know much about that young man. So I don't follow too much with what's been going on. I've been dealing with a hostile takeover, and so it's occupied a little bit of my time. But before I get into this whole thing about Nick and his rise to, the podcast, the changing marketplace, and this war against Vivek Ramaswamy, there needs to be some context. I think I answer the first question first. Vivek's going to be fine. I think Nick Fuentes helps Vivek Ramaswamy in Ohio. I don't think Vivek Ramaswamy needs help. I think he's just fine. Amy Acton, again, the lockdown lady, there's just no way. By the time all the smoke clears and it comes down to the Republican against the Democrat, Vivek's going to do quite well. This because of the makeup of the people. Trump will come and do some stuff around Ohio, and the more that Nick talks, the more people are going to run away from him because of what he said about Hitler. And he just dug into the whole thing. This anti-Jewish kind of thing, that anti-Israel deal, is just, him and Kanye West have put themselves into a whole fringe and marketplace, and there's a reason why, and I'll explain the math and what they're after, how it makes business sense for a young 28-year-old young man who has been, I would say, articulate, talented, but not really knowing how to play in the sandbox with all the other kids. So yes, there's a lot of crossovers in the entertainment industry, in the news industry, cable news industry, whether you're talking about Real America's News or Newsmax or Fox News. They're still run by people who have thoughts about things, and ultimately they have editorial discretion on content, and everybody knows each other in the business. And once you get into that, there's a lot more freedom. There's a reason I do what I do. Now, I don't have over 1 million followers or so on X or some of these other platforms, the way you see like the Dan Bonginos or Nick, this young man has done. I always mess his last name up. Yeah, I always get his name wrong. Fuentes. No matter who it is, there's a lot of folks out there that do quite well, make a lot of money in this news reporting business. I had a lot of offers over the years. I've done this for a long, long time. There's a reason I do these walk and talks. There's a reason why I don't have like a little podcast station set up in an office in my house and do a show like a lot of these other guys do. A lot of people do it these days, and it's quite lucrative, and you can make a lot of money on Rumble and a lot of money on YouTube, but you gotta kind of do what the audience wants, and so you lose some newsworthy autonomy, and I have never wanted to give that up. I do a lot of things in life. I don't need to make a living, even though there's a lot of money to be made. I can tell you there's a lot of reasons why you have to be careful on where you take money. And on my content, I've always kind of maintained a distance. There's opportunities to, people send tips, and they'll throw you money. Cryptocurrency makes it very lucrative these days. I get a lot of offers from a lot of different people. But the problem is, just like in politics, when you take someone's money, now you're beholden to them to some extent. So I always do this to have independence. And I have my several thousand people, and they're real people, they're not bots. I get offers every single day by people looking to pump up my numbers on Rumble on YouTube. I don't play the game. You'll see it on my YouTube. There's almost no views. It's because the views get locked down on how they get reported. There's this new whole industry that they don't put counters up like they used to. You got to buy your counts, essentially. That's certainly the way it is on the blog post that I have, the blog postings. That's why on the administrative side, I could see how many people visit, but I have to take a picture of it and put it up, because when you translate that to what shows up on your sidebar, there's, you've got essentially a paywall that decides what the number is going to be. You have to essentially pay to get a representative number. And that's the way it is across basically all internet platforms. You got to pay to show that you have a following, and the bigger your following, of course, then people think you got this big audience, so then they'll send you money and tips and crypto donations. And essentially what this Nick Fuentes, what he's been doing is no different than a stripper who goes on stage at some gentleman's club and does a enticing little dance in states of undress to get people to throw money at him. And Kanye West has figured that out. He had a major fallout on he just fell apart. He got involved with Trump. He had bad record labels that went bad. He got mad because he felt that a cabal of Jewish people were hurting him. He got divorced with his wife. He was hanging out with Trump somewhat, and he's the one that brought Nick to the Mar-a-Lago thing, and Trump later said, I didn't know who the kid was, he's just sitting there. It was a chance for this young guy to make a name for himself. And Trump talked to just about anybody, but he distanced himself afterwards for sure. Roger Stone quotes this guy a lot. So he's built this following, but how big is the following really? And we'll get into that. There's a lot to talk about regarding the following of some of the next generation of young people. But talking about myself, I had offers to work lots of places over the years. Back in the days of Doc Thompson, the Clear Channel experience, when Doc Thompson was on Clear Channel radio, and then he would pull away sometimes to sub for Glenn Beck. When Glenn Beck was on vacation, Doc Thompson would go and fill in for the Glenn Beck radio show. So, and I was very good friends with Doc Thompson, and when Doc Thompson eventually got fired from Clear Channel, because Clear Channel wanted to get away from some of the controversial Tea Party stuff that I was a part of, and it was a Clear Channel decided corporate radio didn't want any part of it. So I've seen it all up close, and I understand why Nick is, as a young person, has been bumped around. He got into a tiff with Ben Shapiro, and so he, just like Kanye West, they're blaming all the Jewish people who are running the media industry. But really, what it comes down to is they have a hard time playing with other kids in the sandbox. And it's not so much a Jewish cabal that they're fighting up against. They're fighting against their desire to be independent. When they played nice, I mean, Kanye West made over $9 billion. He was married to Kim Kardashian, and life looked like he was on top of the world, and he lost a lot of money when he started associating with Trump and trying to think like a free spirit. That wasn't what they were paying him for. That's not what the $9 billion of assessment was for. And so you kind of have to do what they tell you if you're going to take the money. That's why when people offer me tips and bits and little things here and there, I don't take it. You have to maintain if you're going to do opinion commentary, you got to be independent as much as possible. And it's also why when I do say things, they tend to resonate, and important people do pay attention. And even if I'm not showing millions of dollars of hits, there's a reason why there's, they try to make you feel, unless you're paying to play the game, they control what you look like to the rest of the world. And if you want to look better, you pay to be better. And then if that then translates over to more tips and more people throwing money at you because it's perceived value, advertising revenue, all that kind of stuff. And once you get into that business, you're losing your independence. And I think what you had with with Nick blowing his stack. He'd been kicked around, knocked off shows, canceled, cultured out because he had a tiff with Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire, and he just started going down the same conspiracy path as Kanye West. And they've stayed in touch over time, and everybody in the media is calling the right wing, but I think they're just a wing of impatient, disembodied people who have seen and tasted success and had it ripped away from them, and they're bitter about it. And this Nick, he does this a fairly popular podcast, enough so for Tucker Carlson to go out and want to do an interview with him to kind of get, his side of the story. And, it's catapulted him and done pretty well for him, but it's not a real measure of success. Most of the money that he's making as a young 28-something-year-old person is it's essentially online donations. And you start taking them and you start taking positions that are very controversial, and you go on with Piers Morgan and try to make a fool out of him. That it works because it's just like a stripper doing a show and for an audience to get more tips. And to what degree do you believe any of it? You're just trying to be outlandish so you can boost your profile of being anti-establishment. And there's a reason why that works. So in my case, I had offers to go work. Doc Thompson and I, before he got killed jogging, he got hit by a train, which I think is very suspicious. But needless to say, we were talking about doing a show on the Blaze with Glenn Beck's network, and there was all kinds of chances, and I looked at all those chances, and I really wanted to maintain my independence. So I can say and do and write what I want because I do other things to make my living. I think my opinions are the one thing that I treasure that aren't manipulated and controlled by other people. So we all make decisions in life to be where we are. And I do these little walks because they're casual, and I end up talking to a lot of people, and I want to talk to a lot of people at the same time. So I take these walks, and I walk with everybody who wants to listen, and we have a chat, and I tell people what I think, as opposed to just sitting at some studio ranting and raving for this new emerging market of information disbursement. This is a thing that's changing, which is kind of where Nick's going with all this, and he's not the only one, because there's a whole new class of people in his age group that are going to be different. That's important to talk about. But as far as talking about Vivek Ramaswamy, it's a publicity grab. It's Nick trying to build his brand up by knocking out a GOP candidate. Trump's distanced himself from people like him for obvious reasons. You can't go out there and say you love Hitler, you think Hitler's cool. You can't do that and then expect to have credibility. So the more he talks, the better it's going to be for Vivek Ramaswamy. There's no problem at all. I've met Vivek Ramaswamy lots of times. I was there when he first started building his campaign up, from going from a biotech CEO to turning into politics. I had a front row seat, and I saw him when he was building the brand. And then I've met him, talked to him several times since then. Met his family, met his wife's very sweet. I don't care if they're Hindus or Christian or whatever they are. They're nice people, and he has a lot of good values. And I've met his parents, and they're very nice people. So they're making a issue over anchor babies and trying to climb on to Trump's immigration policy and take a radical stance on it, really to accentuate the podcast audience and throw some red meat to very frustrated people out there, Nick being one of them. Young people look around, and this, you got a 70, almost 80-year-old Trump. That's a different age. And you got a lot of people who are in their 20s and 30s who are looking around and they're saying, what happened to the world? And I don't really like the one that's in it. And I like people who articulate my frustrations. So what's happened here? Again, Vivek Ramaswamy will be fine. He just needs to go out and do his thing. He speaks well, but addressing Nick and letting Nick determine the battleground. JD Vance, I've met JD Vance. I've met his wife. She's very sweet, very nice person. Very nice person. Nick doesn't have the kind of power he thinks he has to go out and disrupt the 2028 election or disrupt or derail Vivek Ramaswamy in Ohio. That just isn't going to happen. It's all bolster talk to get, to build up his media, because he has a revenge tour essentially planned, because conservative media blacklisted him essentially because he got in a spat with Ben Shapiro. And and then he started hanging around with Kanye West on his decline and drop from power, and he adopted this whole anti-Jew thing, and has built a platform off of it that's very destructive. And it's a stupid decision. Now he's dug himself in. Now he can't take it back. So he took all his raw talent he had and really kind of threw it away. I think he'll be relevant for a long time, and I'll explain why. But for the immediate term and for having some sort of sway on the election in Ohio that's going to take place, he don't have the kind of power he thinks he does, and he's going to end up embarrassing himself. And Vivek Ramaswamy will turn out just fine, and all he has to do is just go be Vivek Ramaswamy, and people will go out and vote for him, and they'll love it. Because in the anchor baby bit, which Vivek Ramaswamy was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, born in my neighborhood essentially. And it's not his fault where he was born. To try and make an anchor baby argument out of it is completely preposterous, because people should come and be here, and they're born in the United States. You should have upward mobility, and you can't go turn it into this racism issue the way that this young guy's done, Nick. You don't want to do it. It's not a good idea. So when you take your personal emotions, and again, he's only in his 20s, so he's wearing it all on his sleeves. He's taken his talent, and he's dug in on this radical position. It's made him some short-term money, but it's costing long-term trust. And I'm just telling you, I've been doing this for a very long time. And do you want to be popular? You want to have millions of followers on X, and although you can add them all up and they don't really mean anything, most of them are bots from overseas accounts. You can pay your fee, and they'll jack up your numbers and make you look real good. If you want to look good, that's one thing. If you want to be good, that's a whole nother thing. And it means you got to really be a good person, and you got to stand by all your stuff, and you've got to be able to take the hard stuff every day essentially, and not get the immediate credit of feeling validated by the public. Sometimes you're going to be all by yourself on a lonely island, be the only one saying something, and it takes people months and years sometimes to come around to it. That's what you got to be ready to do. If you really want to do the right stuff and make the right arguments and really articulate good positions. If you just want to be a shock jock like Howard Stern, where you saw what that got him, made him a lot of money over the years, but people kind of look at him as a joke, and that's how he's in years when it's no longer cute or sexy and it loses its nostalgia, then if you fall away as somebody was not very consequential. Now, when it comes to the changing marketplace. So Trump, and you'll hear this when Nick talks a lot, he talks about all the things that Trump did, that he wasn't a Trump supporter. He became a Trump supporter at a very critical time in his life. This is something that came out in the Tucker Carlson interview, which I thought was good. Didn't say a whole bunch of radical stuff. I think the most radical stuff was in the first part of the interview. The second part of the interview was pretty reasonable. Sounded like somebody who actually is well-intended. But the shock jock part of it, when you're trying to scrape your way to success on the backs of controversy, a lot of that you learn because that's how Trump won in 2016. And he won, and people fought for him because 2020, 2021, 2022, and this young guy was catapulted into the inner circle, and pretty soon he was sit with Kanye West and Trump at Mar-a-Lago for Thanksgiving dinner, 2022. And Trump was plotting his reemergence back into politics. But you lose presence when you don't play the game right, and now you're on the outside. So now you have people like Nick and Kanye West that are trying to bring the system down from within. Even Roger Stone to a large extent, and even Steve Bannon and some others. So, they're not necessarily insiders. They're kind of on the outside periphery. Trump lets people kind of close enough to, kind of build a coalition, but you can't have them destroy everything that you're a part of. So they get their distance. They get pushed away a little bit, and then they take that as an insult, and then they start lashing out like this Nick guy did. Vivek Ramaswamy is the Trump-endorsed candidate. So he's trying to take a swipe at someone really to hurt Trump and to really kind of hurt MAGA because his feelings are hurt. Essentially, he's a young guy that had his feelings hurt. So you end up with now someone who is making MAGA look bad because it represents right-wing extremism as the media defines it, when really it's a person just saying all kinds of crazy off-the-wall stuff in order to build a brand, and so he can move out of his parents' basement where he does his little show. So he's going to get some media attention, and it's going to juice up his ego because they love the fact that it's a MAGA person that's turned against the Trump picks, the Trump way of doing things, and they see it as a way to create a fissure in the MAGA movement. And Nick's trading essentially away his future integrity and his role in politics for some short-term money and some popularity with a shock jock gig. And I told my little background there because I've had lots of opportunities to do exactly what be the shock jock, go out and make it happen, get paid a lot of money for being that person, start getting on some networks. Had a lot of offers, and some of them paid really well, and I turned them down to maintain the integrity of being able to have an argument. So you can own your argument. You don't want to sell that ability. Never want to sell that ability. I wouldn't do it for anything. But the changing marketplace is Trump unleashed a new strategy in politics that everybody's now scared to death of. And that's go out there and say what you want, say what you think. Again, when Trump did his 2016 and 2024 campaigns, he pretty much said, I'm not going to, if the Republican Party, if whoever they endorse, I'll support. He said, I'm not going to support them. So he gave kids like Nick and others the blueprint on how to conduct future elections. So here's the problem, and Nick talked about with Tucker Carlson, and I think it's pretty rational, actually. It's a real problem, is the place where young men are. Young men are addicted to pornography. They're doing drugs, playing video games. Nick's been talking against it. He has this big audience of young males who are tired of getting pushed around by spoiled brat women who have adopted progressive ideas. And that's they don't want to get married. They're out there doing porn and everybody's sending naked pictures of themselves. So there's no reason to go marry a woman or do anything to build up to anything. And men are left kind of wanting to know what the mission is and how can they fulfill it. So all of a sudden now you have people, this next generation of advocates who no longer want to play by the rules that kept society kind of intact. And it's like, well, don't talk bad about Islam. Don't talk bad about women. Don't talk bad about people of color, and don't just stay off those topics. You can talk about taxes, you can talk about everything else, but don't go down. We have this controlled identity politics route that no one's allowed to touch. And then when someone like Nick Fuentes comes out and says, Hitler I thought was pretty cool. Well, you can't say that. Remember, Marge Schott got completely shut down, lost her business, owning the Cincinnati Reds over saying similar things. You're not allowed to say that because society has created these rules. And if you follow the rules, you're in. If you don't follow the rules, you're out. And now that everybody has their own independent podcast, and they have donations that come in with Bitcoin. They don't have to get corporate money from some boss that's easily controlled by some globalist agenda. Now they don't have to play by the rules. And now you have all these disenfranchised, angry people, especially males under 30, who don't see a path forward for them, and Nick represents their life. They're where they're at and what they're frustrated with. And a lot of them would love to have a nice wife, but there aren't nice women because they all follow this progressive nonsense. And they went down the rabbit hole. And again, you find if you see a pretty girl sitting at some restaurant and you like to ask her out and go take her on a date, if she's over 19, she's probably got topless pictures of her out on the internet, especially if she's halfway decent looking. And that's a problem. So who's going to sign up to go fight for a good family with someone like that? I've always said that people who choose to be strippers in life, that might make them a little bit of money from 18 to 22. But then once you start losing that cuteness and you start getting into your upper 20s and 30s, the money goes away real fast. And who's going to sign up to have babies and want to have a house and do good things with someone like that? So we have a very progressive implementation of destruction of females, destruction of the family, which is all purposeful. And women were obviously the targets of this. Feminism was a weapon. It wasn't a good idea to make everybody fair and safe. It was meant to dislodge the creation of American families. So you got a lot of men who are biologically inclined to go out and have good families and fight for good families and go buy a lawnmower at Tractor Supply and cut their grass every Sunday before they watch football and have a nice life and raise their kids and do good things as a father. That's all been taken from them. So of course they're mad, and of course they're going to love it when someone like this Nick kid goes out and says a lot of crazy things to get them all riled up. And they're going to love it so much because they're not spending money on their building families. They're going to send him $100 in Bitcoin to keep saying what he's been saying, because he's saying what they can't say because they don't have a platform. So you got a game going on here, and if you bring down the man, which Vivek Ramaswamy is the man in the Republican race, and you bring down the GOP and bring down all those evil insiders, because none of them have a seat at the table, including Nick, then you have sabotaged the political movement and are essentially a political terrorist, and you're trading that integrity for money, for the opportunity to make a bunch of angry people throw money at you. And that's the way politics is going to be. This is what the post-Trump years look like. It's never going to go back to cordial, policy-driven discussions. And it's never going to go back. That's what Madami is all about in New York. The cat's out of the bag and it ain't going back in. So you have these different factions of groups, and there's different ways of getting out there, and institutions have lost control of being able to control the message, which they've maintained since the invention of television. That's no longer the case. So you have people like Nick who are going to try it out and see if he can dislodge Vivek Ramaswamy from Ohio. He'll claim that he stood for America first and kept a person of Indian heritage, a Hindu, from becoming governor of Ohio. And he'll beat on that drum and hope that it carries for another 10 years of expanded audience of discontent members who feel like they've been left behind, which in a lot of cases they have. Years and years of this behavior has left so many people discontent. The audience that is supporting people like Nick are no longer going to run away from him when they say something crazy about Hitler. And that's what Piers Morgan, you could see on his face during that interview. He realized that Nick wasn't afraid of the consequences of saying that he thought Hitler was cool. And that is a terrifying prospect to the institutionalists that have spent their entire lives kind of adhering to the system. The system changed. And Nick knows it, and so does his audience. So does people like Kanye West. Trump, the downside of the way Trump won his elections is that he revealed the holes, the fissures. And now you've got a new generation that's going to capitalize on that for their own purposes. And all bets are off on being able to control that narrative. It's never going back in the bag. So, I think I hate to see good talent blow it on short-term gains. If I was to advise anybody, especially young people, be careful what you're willing to sell. I've made decisions in my life not to sell that kind of stuff away. You don't get a big pop. You don't get an ego pop from saying, oh, look, I have 1 million followers and all these people love me. You can buy 1 million followers. If you play the game, do what they say, do the clickbait stuff without having proper integrity attached to it. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to get to a lot of followers, but what's the worth of those followers, especially if you sold them at the cost of your own ability to make good decisions? There's a cost to everything. And I would advise anybody out there thinking about these things, be careful what you put a price on. I've had to make that personal decision in my own life, and I do what I do because I want people to have some thoughts to think about that's not connected to some corporate media. Because I would explain it to people in a restaurant or on a street corner or anywhere they want to talk. I would walk and talk like this because I care about the issues, and I care about explaining it to people who might not otherwise understand it. And that's why I do it. I certainly don't do it to go get tips or Bitcoin donations from discontent people who are frustrated because their lives are wrecked and they want a voice to articulate their frustration. And that's all this whole Vivek Ramaswamy thing is a chance to kind of play on people's anxieties and fears in a destructive way, and then you use the capital and knocking him off because Nick thinks that the race is kind of clear based on the politics, and if he can skew the points 2 or 3 points in Amy Acton's favor, he can have a victory that'll catapult him to great success on the podcast market. And maybe he'll be able to wear that around his neck like the Jake Paul fight that we had the other night where he got his jaw broken. They always do a lot of theatrics when you're doing the pre-fight ceremonies, and then once you get hit in the face and you're bleeding, your teeth are knocked out, and you've embarrassed yourself to the world. I would not do what Jake Paul did in that fight. The big Netflix fight where his jaw got broken, going up against a heavyweight champion. Should have known better before even doing it. But at the end of it, what's Jake Paul going to say? Hey, I got my teeth knocked out, my jaw broken in 2 places. I look like a fool in front of hundreds of millions of people, but I made $92 million. And that's true. He's got a big YouTube channel, and by doing all kinds of crazy stuff, it's like the Jackass guys did on the show back in the day. There's a lot of people that trade their personal integrity for making a fool of themselves and getting paid for it. And that's certainly what Jake Paul did, and that's certainly what Nick Fuentes did. And that's what this whole thing with Vivek Ramaswamy is headed for. And it's going to be embarrassing. They're all going to get their jaws broken and knocked out. And we tried to warn them ahead of time, but if they choose not to listen, that's on them. But I think Vivek Ramaswamy is in a good place. I can tell you that. I think they're not going to be able to move the needle at all. And the more that Nick talks, the more that Vivek will do well. And it'll only help Vivek people are going to vote for Vivek because all this debate makes people sympathetic. Because Vivek certainly deserves a good shot, and when he wants to offer himself up as someone who wants to make things better, people will rally behind that. Because ultimately, it comes down to money. How's the economy, and who can keep it going in people's favor? It's not going to come down to where were you born and what do you believe religiously. It's going to be, how can you help me? And Vivek Ramaswamy's positions are going to be great for Ohio, and that's ultimately what people will vote for. Anyways, Rich Hoffman here. Share, subscribe, make tomorrow a better day. If you haven't read my book, The Gunfighter's Guide to Business, I think you'll love it. Anyway, have a good day. See you later.